Revealed. 7 shocking restrictions on slaves in ancient Rome that will surprise you forever. Sarah's pulse quickened as she sat in the dim archive room of the Smithsonian, the silence of the old building amplifying her sense of impending revelation. Each document on the table felt heavier, laden with the struggles of a past she yearned to connect with. 7 restrictions on slaves, drawn from musty scrolls of ancient Rome, felt like echoes of her ancestral lineage. They mirrored the civil rights her great-great-grandfather had fought for, igniting a passion in her that was both inspiring and burdensome. She could almost hear his footsteps marching bravely, yet the weight of that history pressed heavily on her. She had always believed that progress was linear, that the past lessons paved the way to a brighter future. But sitting here, surrounded by the shadows of injustice, her pulse raced with doubt. She jotted down notes, doodled angry scribbles in the margins, and felt her resolve intertwine with frustration. Focus on American history, her mentor's dismissive words echoed in her mind, a stark reminder of the resistance that awaited her. Doubt clawed at her. Would her work matter? Would her discoveries be something more than forgotten whispers? Before she could spiral further into her thoughts, she remembered her grandmother's words. The kitchen table, washed in warm chamomile hues, became a sanctuary in her mind. "We rise by remembering the lessons of those who came before us," she had said. Yet, could she balance honoring that legacy while forging her path amidst resistance from authority? As she sipped her tea, her internal tug-of-war escalated. Ambition collided with the loyalty she felt to a mentor who, despite her frustrations, was an emblem of tradition and authority. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With her resolve ignited, she crafted an exhibit proposal that connected the ancient struggles with contemporary issues. But the act of confrontation loomed. That very afternoon, she sought out her mentor, determined to stand firm against the silence that formed walls around her. Her heart raced as she articulated her vision, words tumbling out in a mix of passion and fear. Each point hung suspended in the air, a precarious balancing act of urgency and vulnerability. Sarah reminded herself of the weight of history in every breath she took, her own struggles interwoven with the exhibit's significance. As she awaited her mentor's response, the tension in her stomach coiled tighter. Would she find acceptance, or would further dismissal whip her ambitions into despair? Every moment felt like an eternity. She faced not just the criticism of a seasoned historian, but the shadows of those who came before her. In the stillness that followed her words, doubt festered, and a sense of panic clenched her heart. What if she failed to honor her family's legacy? What if this echo of history faded into the abyss? A dreadful silence settled, leaving her standing on the precipice of unresolved tension, anxious for the next chapter to unfold. The air in the archive felt oppressively thick, as if the very walls were conspiring against her. Finally, her mentor broke the silence, the weight of her gaze falling heavily on Sarah. She began, her voice measured but wary. The focus should remain on our specific domain, American history. Bridging those worlds can muddy the waters. 100 rebuttals sprang to Sarah's mind. Muddy the waters? Or perhaps deepen the understanding? Every fiber of her being resisted the urge to retreat. Instead, she summoned the courage she thought she lacked. But these connections matter. Ignoring the past only perpetuates the cycles of injustice we see today. My proposal isn't about dilution. It's about revelation. The delicate dance of academia and personal conviction played out before them. Sarah felt a flicker of power surge inside her. Her mentor's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Sarah feared she had crossed an invisible line. But perhaps this confrontation was necessary. I know my vision stretches across time, she continued, her voice gaining assurance. The restrictions imposed on slaves in ancient Rome inform our understanding of modern struggles for freedom. It's not just about the past. It's what we do with it that defines our future. Her mentor paused, as if weighing each word against the gravity of the moment. You realize, she said slowly, that pursuing this may alienate you from the established circles you seek to enter. The thought spiraled in Sarah's mind. Alienation. The very term echoed a familiar note of despair, the fear of standing alone, of being cast into irrelevance. Yet, she felt an undeniable urge to challenge that very fear. Could this be her moment of truth, the time when she truly defined her boundaries and aspirations? Perhaps that's a risk I'm willing to take, she replied, her voice steady. As the tension hung between them, inside Sarah's mind, possibilities collided. She imagined crafting narratives that intertwined the voices of the oppressed across time, and she envisioned people engaging with this history in a way that was both educational and transformative. Each idea fluttered like a banner unfurling in the wind, defying the limitations imposed on her. All right, her mentor relented, albeit cautiously. I'll give you a chance to refine your proposal based on this connection. But I expect commitment, research, and a thoughtful approach to presenting this dual narrative. The sense of victory surged within Sarah, flooding her veins with adrenaline. Thank you, she breathed, the weight of uncertainty lifting slightly. But as she exited the room, a nagging voice echoed in her thoughts. How much freedom would she actually have to explore this intertwining of histories? And more critically, could she accomplish it without losing herself or her mentor's approval in the process? The exhilaration of that moment turned to reflection as she returned to her desk. Defining her path was fraught with challenges that stretched beyond the echoes of the past. She felt the pulsing call of history urging her forward. Yet it came with a query: what if she were stepping into a darkness unknown? In that moment, Sarah resolved to push against the boundaries of her academic comfort zone. With determination gelling her ambition, she opened her notebook, ready to dive deeper into her research. She began to plan meticulously, tracing connections between the slaveries of yesterday and today, but with every stroke of her pen, anxiety curled back around her. Was she truly equipped for an academic battle that demanded so much stake? The thoughts spiraled, but in the grip of realization, she knew the stakes were high. As she penned each new discovery, an unexpected shadow loomed in her mind. Who would stand against her? The world of academia was a battleground, and she was on the precipice of her fight and that confrontation against her mentor. A new resolve began to emerge, one marked by both trepidation and a fierce commitment to honor the legacy she took so much pride in. As Sarah's pen scraped across the paper, plotting her expansive ideas, she wondered if she was alone in her ambitions, or if there awaited an equally passionate ally in the shadows. And who might that ally be? Would her resolve draw them out, or push them further away? Or perhaps, would the next step align her with unexpected partners, unsheathing a more profound confrontation she had yet to fathom? With a newfound sense of purpose, Sarah immersed herself in research, her notebook becoming a sanctuary for her swirling thoughts. This venture was no longer merely an academic pursuit, but a personal quest. She was not just studying history, she was preparing to engage with it, to confront its complexities head-on. Still, the tight knot of unease in her chest wouldn't loosen. Every fact she unearthed was a stepping stone, but with every revelation, old insecurities resurfaced. Could she make these connections clear and impactful? Would her peers acknowledge the significance of her findings, or would they dismiss her work as too ambitious, too wide-ranging? She expanded her sources, reaching for books that spanned not only the slave trade across centuries but also theories from social justice movements that resonated with her findings. In the quiet hours of the night, surrounded by stacks of papers, she found solace in a community of thinkers who, long before her, faced similar questions of allegiance and acceptance. They became her silent allies, voices from the past lending her strength. Yet, there was a darker presence navigating the corridors of her mind. The specter of her mentor's warning haunted her, echoing the doubts she had tried to push away. Alienation. It crept like a chill, whispering caution as she contemplated what it meant to speak the truth of history as she understood it. What if scenarios swirled, demanding to be confronted? What if she lost her mentor-esque support? What if her ideas were too radical for her academic circles? What if she failed to bridge the divide she aimed to span? In a conscious effort to distract herself, Sarah sought out discussions with her peers. Sharing her burgeoning thoughts on historical connections became an informal expedition, with each conversation pushing the boundaries of her confidence. Some engaged enthusiastically, while others raised profound objections, sparking heated debates that forced her to sharpen her argument. "Sarah, you can't ignore the shifts in power dynamics over the centuries," one colleague insisted during a meeting. "Historical parallels can lose their significance if we apply them too freely." But as they dissected the nuances of her proposal, she felt an electric spark of clarity. Perhaps it wasn't just about juxtaposition. It was about context, about understanding the changing definitions of oppression. Feeling emboldened, she crafted a presentation aimed at a small group within the department, a tentative first step toward sharing her vision at larger forums. During her preparation, she grappled with insecurity, unsure if her interpretations would resonate. Standing before the group, her heart raced, but she refused to let fear overtake her. She introduced her work methodically, weaving in references not just to American history, but echoing the lessons of the past with modern implications. The shifting expressions on her colleagues' faces ranged from skepticism to intrigue, and as she navigated through their questions, something powerful surged within her. Sarah found herself defending her position with tenacity she didn't know she possessed. She invoked thought leaders, connecting threads of the past to contemporary voices. She felt the energy in the room begin to shift. A budding acknowledgement of her argument began to flicker amidst the skepticism. Just as she thought she was gaining traction, one colleague interjected forcefully. "But how, Sarah? You can't be serious about suggesting that a society as flawed as ancient Rome can mirror our current issues in this way. You're risking oversimplifying immensely complex injustices." Her pulse quickened. The debate intensified. This was the confrontation she anticipated, a direct challenge that could derail her. But in that moment, an unfamiliar clarity enveloped her. The stakes had transformed. It wasn't merely her argument at risk, but her burgeoning identity as a scholar. "No, you're mistaking my intent," she countered, her voice firm. "It's not about drawing exact parallels, but about highlighting continuities of struggle." The energy in the room shifted, curiosity flaring in some eyes, while others remained steeped in skepticism. As the discussion unfolded, Sarah felt her initial doubts dissipate amidst this engagement. The confrontation presented an unexpected opportunity to refine her voice, to solidify her arguments under duress. With the meeting concluding, the air buzzed with both unease and curiosity. Walking away, Sarah grasped something new about herself. Perhaps she was ready for this battle after all. But in tracing these connections, another thought began to bubble beneath the surface. What truly lay ahead? The stakes had only begun to reveal themselves, and she was acutely aware that every step forward might invite unforeseen challenges. As she gathered her papers, she wondered if she could truly lead this narrative when the tide of academia could still run against her, positioning her as an outsider. Would she stand firm in her vision, or was she merely a flickering flame in a storm waiting to extinguish? And just as the day's uncertainties threatened to engulf her anew, she caught a glimpse of another colleague's expression, a mixture of surprise and interest as they approached her. "I think we should talk." Would this conversation ignite a new chapter, or would it unravel the tenuous progress she had just begun to establish? Sarah felt a surge of apprehension as her colleague, Emily, approached her with an unreadable expression. The day's whirlwind of emotions, doubt, determination, uncertainty flooded her mind again, thickening the air around her. "What's on your mind, Emily?" she managed to ask, trying to mask her nervousness with professionalism. "I wanted to hear more about your presentation," Emily said, glancing around to ensure they wouldn't be overheard. "You caught me off guard with your perspective. It's bold, and I respect that." The praise ignited a spark in Sarah, but it quickly dimmed under the weight of her concerns. "Do you really think so?" A lot of people seemed skeptical. Emily nodded, her eyes steady and encouraging. Skepticism isn't necessarily a bad thing. It can lead to deeper discussions. But I can't help wondering what's really driving you? Why this topic? The direct question hit Sarah like a thunderclap. The rush of her internal reasoning about connection and historical resonance halted. Because she started slowly, scrunching her notebook tightly to steady herself. I see echoes of oppression that transcend time. I want to connect those struggles and reveal their relevances. Are you prepared for the pushback? Emily asked, a mix of empathy and caution entwined in her tone. Academic circles can be tough, especially with radical ideas. Are you ready to defend your position, especially if it leads to further isolation? The confrontation with her insecurities reared its head once again, swirling dark thoughts of failure and alienation. But then a thought crystallized. If I let fear dictate my work, I'm not honoring those whose histories I wish to amplify. Sarah replied, her voice gaining strength. Each layer I peel back reveals stories that need to be told. If it costs me acceptance, then I have to stand firm. A flicker of admiration crossed Emily's face. You're wise beyond your years, and that's a rare quality. But being wise doesn't shield you from loneliness. You will face critics, and they may not just disagree, they may actively seek to undermine you. The weight of that reality made Sarah's stomach churn. Was she truly prepared for the fallout that might accompany her convictions? Yet, in the eye of that storm, a flicker of resolve ignited within her. I hope to surround myself with those willing to engage. If I'm seen as an outsider, perhaps that's an indication that I'm treading a path less traveled. Sarah said, infusing her words with conviction. Emily tapped her chin thoughtfully. There's power in your ambition. You mentioned historical parallels, those can ignite meaningful discourse. But don't shy away from vulnerability. Authenticity is compelling, but it's also a double-edged sword. A ripple of apprehension settled in Sarah's gut. She embraced the notion of vulnerability, yet the reality of how it could expose her to deeper criticisms loomed large now. I'll need to be prepared, then, she said quietly. But how does one balance authenticity with the inherent risks of sharing difficult truths? That's where your growth lies, Emily smiled. You'll discover how to navigate these waters as you continue. But keep your core values in sight. It's easy to get lost amidst the debates and disagreements. As their conversation deepened, Sarah felt an unexpected sense of camaraderie. Emily's insights fortified her resolve. This wasn't merely about defending her ideas. It was about cultivating a new identity, one rooted in authenticity, tempered by wisdom. Just as they parted ways, a gnawing thought surfaced. How far was Sarah willing to extend herself for this pursuit? Was the potential isolation from her peers worth the risk of advocating for what she believed in? Later that evening, Sarah stared at her notes under the dim light of her desk lamp, replaying Emily's words in her mind. The minute she fortified her stance on historical connections, a sprawl of considerations unfurled before her. She needed clarity on her next move, not just in academia but also within herself. Recalling the many facets of her research, Sarah could still feel the tension palpable from earlier discussions. Different choices loomed ahead. Would she champion her bold narrative despite risking alienation? Or could she navigate the labyrinth of skepticism while engaging her peers meaningfully? With a heavy heart and an electrifying spirit, she gathered her notes, poised on the brink of a decision. The flicker of a new understanding glowed in her chest. The moment had come to draw the line in the sand. But would she choose the path that echoed her beliefs or the one that offered her safety at the cost of her authenticity? A knock on her door startled her from her reverie, pulling her back to the present as she wrestled with anticipation. Sarah, it's me, Maria. Can we talk? You're going to want to hear this. Would this new conversation challenge her further or reinforce her commitment to her ideals? Maria stepped into the dimly lit room, the faint glow from Sarah's desk lamp casting shadows against the walls. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, crossing her arms. The anxious energy in the air was palpable. What's going on, Maria? You look serious, Sarah said, trying to shake off the remnants of her earlier contemplation. Have you thought more about that presentation you're planning? Your ideas are making waves, but you need to be strategic, Maria cautioned, her brow furrowing with concern. Sarah nodded, glancing at the scattered notes that surrounded her. I know. Emily warned me about pushback, but I believe in the importance of these connections. I can't ignore the stories that need to be amplified. True, Maria said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. But you also have to consider your positioning. This could define your career. Are you prepared for how defending such radical views might affect you personally? That familiar coil of doubt tightened in Sarah's chest. The idea of wrestling with isolation for her convictions felt like a looming specter. I'm going to stand firm, she stated, seeking affirmation in her own words. But what do you mean by positioning? Maria moved closer, the intensity of her gaze igniting Sarah's curiosity. You've got the guts to question long-held beliefs, but that's not enough. You need a strategy. Present your ideas in a way that invites dialogue rather than division. Can you frame your narrative around shared values, rather than just confrontational truths? The suggestion struck Sarah as a revelation. You mean, instead of focusing solely on radical comparisons, I could draw insights that resonate with broader principles? Find common ground? Exactly. Engage your audience instead of alienating them. You want them to wrestle with the ideas, not shut them down because their defenses go up. A wave of excitement crashed over Sarah. Maria's perspective felt like a break in the clouds. It would make the conversation richer. Deep in the discourse, she pondered, scribbling notes rapidly. Don't get lost in the excitement, Sarah, Maria interjected. Your core message matters, but so does how you deliver it. Your authenticity is your strength, but you have to wield it wisely. The reminder grounded Sarah. Could vulnerability really coexist with strategic framing? How do I ensure I don't compromise my authenticity in this process? Be transparent about your intentions. State why these issues matter. Your audience isn't just a passive container for your ideas. They need to feel your commitment. If you can embody that, they'll be more inclined to engage rather than dismiss, Maria advised, her expression encouraging yet serious. Sarah felt a surge of determination. Could this be the pivotal moment she needed? The balance between authenticity and strategy now felt within grasp. Suddenly, the gravity of her task set in. She had to convey her message in a way that would resonate amidst scrutiny. The thought propelled both anxiety and enthusiasm within her. The very core of her being struggled with the potential fallout, yet a fortified sense of resolve kindled into existence. Okay, Sarah replied, confidence mingling with a touch of fear. I'll refine my approach. I'll present this as a dialogue rather than a debate. But am I ready to confront the inevitable criticism that may come my way? I can't ignore that reality. Maria hesitated, then nodded solemnly. You're already prepared. The very act of questioning your methods shows growth. Just make sure you have a support system in place, whether that's colleagues, mentors, or even an online community. You'll need allies, especially as tensions rise. A new layer of plans started to form in Sarah's mind. She realized that personal development wasn't just about fortifying her own arguments. It also involved cultivating relationships that could lift her when the discussions got tough. Allies would anchor her during waves of challenge. Sarah's thoughts raced, contemplating the possibilities ahead. Would she be able to present a narrative that engaged without alienating? How would she deal with those who would oppose her ideas fiercely? As Maria opened the door to leave, she paused. Remember, you're not just presenting history, you're becoming a part of it. How you write it matters as much as the content itself. The weight of those words hung in the air as the door clicked shut, leaving Sarah alone once more. What did it mean to be not only a scholar but an active participant in shaping discourse? The prospect ignited a fire within her, but there were still hurdles to overcome. With a newfound sense of purpose, Sarah returned to her notes, fingers trembling with a mix of anticipation and dread. The plan was forming, but the execution required courage and embrace of authenticity against the backdrop of skepticism. As she scribbled fervently, her heart quickened. What if the backlash was fiercer than she anticipated? Would she hold fast, or would her resolve waver as she faced the pressures to conform? The challenge was clear, but her path was not yet defined. The question whispered in her mind, unfinished but urgent. Would she rise to the occasion, or would she retreat into the safety of silence? Sarah sat at her desk surrounded by a chaotic swirl of notes, each one a fragment of her shifting thoughts. She felt adrenaline surging through her veins, heightening her senses and leaving her disoriented, yet invigorated. The clock ticked steadily, a reminder that every passing minute was a step closer to the presentation she had both craved and dreaded. The room was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the tumult within her. Questions loomed large. What if her ideas didn't resonate? What if her approach backfired? Refusing to succumb to panic, she forced herself to breathe deeply, pushing aside the doubts that echoed in her mind. She needed to simplify her message, to carve it into something digestible yet profound. As Sarah returned to her notes, she recognized a pattern emerging. Each idea she scribbled could be linked to a broader human value, tapping into themes of empathy and understanding rather than mere contention. This realization felt like a revelation, illuminating a path forward that didn't compromise her integrity. She could engage her audience by emphasizing the importance of connection. She picked up her pen, feeling it as an extension of her resolve. Start with a story, she whispered to herself. Be vulnerable, share your own experiences. This thought ignited a flickering flame of inspiration. Her own struggles could grant her audience not merely a glimpse, but an invitation into her perspective. The risk of sharing her vulnerability stirred up conflicting emotions. On one hand, authenticity held immense power. On the other, it exposed her to potential scorn. Yet this tension formed the backbone of her growth. Navigating this path of uncertainty could not only elevate her message but also solidify her stance in the eyes of those who might challenge her perspective. Focusing once more on her notes, Sarah began to outline her main arguments. She realized that to truly connect with her audience, she had to acknowledge their fears and biases. It was a daunting task, reminding herself that critics would not simply judge her ideas but her very character. Yet, confronting this reality fueled her determination. If she could lay bare her reasoning while addressing their apprehensions, maybe she could construct a bridge rather than a barrier. Minutes morphed into hours as she painstakingly rearranged her central messages. Each revision felt like chipping away at a rough stone to reveal a sculpture. It was not merely about communicating facts. It was about fostering understanding and dialogue. Each word became a tool to dismantle preconceived notions, ensuring the audience felt invited into the conversation rather than attacked by it. However, as she populated her slides, a growing worry shadowed her inspiration. Would her efforts be enough to withstand the scrutiny that was sure to follow? She felt the weight of anticipation pressing down on her chest with each new thought. In that moment of clarity, the importance of her allies came rushing back. Building connections with her peers and mentors became increasingly imperative. Who could help bolster her message? She started listing potential allies, individuals from her network who might be willing to support her newfound strategy. As she pondered the people she could reach out to, her phone buzzed, shattering her concentration. It was a message from Emily. Hey, I know you're working on that presentation. I want to discuss it. I have some ideas that could help, it read. An unexpected wave of gratitude washed over Sarah. This was an opportunity, a connection she could lean on. Emily had always been a voice of reason in the chaos. She realized the moment had arrived to reach out, to expose her plans and vulnerabilities starkly yet strategically. Could this exchange not only help polish her presentation but also create a collaborative energy that further strengthened her resolve? As anxiety mingled with excitement, Sarah glanced at her notes one last time. The unrelenting requirement for growth persisted. In that crucible of pressure, she recognized an emboldening truth. The confrontation was not simply with her critics, but with her insecurities. The narrative she chose to present was essential, but who she chose to be in that moment mattered even more. With a deep breath, she replied to Emily's text, hopeful. Let us meet tomorrow. I'd love to hear your thoughts. As she pressed send, Sarah sensed she was standing at the threshold of becoming someone entirely new, a voice not just in defense of her ideas but a participant in shaping the conversations around them. What she didn't realize was that the real test loomed closer, a direct confrontation with an opponent who planned to dismantle her argument at its core. The following day dawned with a thick heaviness in the air, a contrast to the flurry of thoughts swirling through Sarah's mind. She arrived at the cafe ahead of Emily, cradling her coffee while battling an itch of apprehension. The cafe hummed with conversations and clinking dishes, but all she could focus on was the weight of her upcoming presentation. As Emily approached, the tension momentarily lifted. Her confident walk and warm smile infused Sarah with a sense of relief. They exchanged pleasantries before settling into a corner booth, and as they began discussing her presentation, Sarah felt her heart racing. She needed to open up entirely, yet the prospect of vulnerability settled heavily on her shoulders. "Let us start from the beginning," Emily suggested, her tone encouraging. Sarah took a deep breath, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee grounding her. "Well, I was thinking," Sarah's voice quavered, but she pushed through. "I want to bring in personal stories, not just facts." As she shared her vision, she watched Emily's face shift from curiosity to keen interest. The discussion flowed easily until Sarah reached the core of her argument, the part that heavily hinged on vulnerability. "I'm terrified they won't take me seriously if I share too much." Emily leaned forward, a glint of understanding in her eyes. "You have to own those struggles, Sarah. They resonate. You'd be surprised how many people appreciate vulnerability in a presentation." Her earnestness cut through the self-doubt that threatened to engulf Sarah as they brainstormed. Emily posed questions that opened Sarah's mind to possibilities she hadn't considered. What if she framed her arguments around pivotal life events? What if she illustrated each point with scenes from her own struggles, drawing parallels to the broader theme of connection? The flicker of inspiration reignited within Sarah, brightening the dark corners of her apprehension. Yet, beneath her budding excitement lay an unease, a gnawing awareness that these were untested waters. Was she truly ready to bare her soul? After some time, her thoughts coalesced into clarity. Sarah felt a spark of confidence arise, buoying her as she crafted her presentation from memories of setbacks and victories. The very essence of her argument began to emerge as she combined her personal narrative with the professional insights she had cultivated over the years. But as the ideas flowed, so did an unsettling realization. Sharing her story meant facing her demons, old vulnerabilities that wrapped themselves in the guise of doubt. Would her past oversights and failures sway her audience more than her successes? Each recollection felt like a potential weapon wielded against her. Yet Sarah knew she could reframe those struggles into stories of resilience. After they finished compiling notes, Emily glanced at Sarah thoughtfully, a silence hanging between them before she finally broke it. "Sarah, you have a powerful voice. You can make people feel what you feel." That affirmation sent waves of warmth through Sarah, pushing back against her doubts. But the lingering specter of her opponent's impending critique loomed larger in her mind, a looming cloud over their productive session. "Tomorrow, when I present, I have to be ready for backlash, especially from those who might undermine my credibility," Sarah confessed. "What if they exploit my vulnerability?" Emily's response was immediate, firm. "Let them try. The real strength lies in how you handle it. Use their doubt as fuel for your fire." As they wrapped up, Sarah felt empowered yet contemplative, the essence of her upcoming challenge crystallizing vividly before her. This was not merely a presentation. It was a confrontation not just with her critics, but with the parts of herself she had kept hidden too long. Leaving the cafe, Sarah pondered the paradox. In the battle for authenticity, her greatest adversary would be the fear of exposure. And the deeper she dove into her story, the louder the echoes of inner doubt shouted back at her. Back at her desk, she began a new list. Reminders of her strengths, affirmations to combat potential criticisms, and anecdotes that illustrated her journey. As night cloaked the sky, the pulse of uncertainty steadied. She felt equipped, but the coming battle grew loomingly tangible. Sarah could almost taste the adrenaline of the next day's confrontation. It would demand everything she had. But no matter the outcome, could this presentation act as the catalyst for a deeper transformation? With a striking clarity, she admitted one truth emerging from this would not just redefine how others saw her. It could reshape the very foundation of how she viewed herself. That fiery resolve birthed a new question. What if her greatest triumph lay not merely in convincing others, but in discovering her own unyielding strength beneath the weight of vulnerability? The moment of truth was near, and with it, the undeniable reality that what lay ahead could shatter her fears or solidify her resolve once and for all. Dawn broke with a premature brightness, bathing Sarah's room in a harsh glow. She had barely slept, her mind racing with the invisible barriers of anxiety and expectation. The presentation loomed like a storm cloud, pressing down on her chest, demanding attention while offering no easy reprieve. As she rose, the familiar weight of doubt clung to her. She was on the precipice of vulnerability, but today she would also embrace courage. After a whirlwind shower, she dressed with care, each article of clothing a conscious choice aimed at instilling confidence. Standing in front of the mirror, she fixed her gaze on her reflection, searching for the resolve she needed. Today is the day, she whispered to herself, an affirmation that hung delicately in the air, an invitation for belief to replace her usual self-scrutiny. Arriving at the venue, Sarah's heart hammered against her ribcage, each pulse a reminder of the stakes involved. She tucked the stack of notes under her arm as she navigated through the bustling crowd, her eyes flickering over familiar faces, some friendly, others potentially hostile. The anticipation was a thick fog, and she inhaled deeply, trying to steady her breath and not become entangled in fear as she approached the stage. A chill of panic gripped her heart. The podium rose before her, a seemingly insurmountable barrier between herself and the audience, a judgmental sea of eyes. What if they saw her weaknesses and pounced? What if she faltered, her voice breaking under the pressure? These thoughts churned violently, but Emily's words echoed sharply in her mind. Use their doubt as fuel for your fire. It was a switch. She could either let fear consume her or transform it into a blazing catalyst for change. The lights dimmed, and an insistent hush fell over the room. With a deep, grounding breath, she stepped forward, her legs trembling slightly. She clutched the podium, steadied herself, and began with a personal story that had previously felt too raw to share. As the words tumbled from her lips, she noticed a shift. First, it was the flicker of surprise crossing some faces, followed by stretched ears of others leaning in, captivated by the honesty she forged in her narrative. Sarah's voice gained strength with each passing moment, her story weaving through moments of hardship and lessons learned. Pulses of vulnerability, once a concern, now emerged as the essence of her message. She spoke not just of failures but of resilience, of how the cracks in her facade had led to unexpected beauty. Each anecdote was a stepping stone, her transformation showcased in the light of her battles. However, the specters of realization lingered. As she spoke, fragments of her past, the ghost of self-doubt, the fears of not being taken seriously lingered in the shadows, creeping back in as she sensed skepticism bubbling in the audience. Were they questioning the validity of her experiences? Were they ready to dissect her hidden insecurities? Just as these thoughts began to swirl, she caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd: Jonas, one of her most vocal critics. Their eyes locked, and instantaneously, she felt the temperature drop within herself. Could he undermine everything she had so painstakingly built? The uncertainty wrapped around her, threatening the strength she had just nurtured. In that suspended moment, Sarah paused, the weight of her vulnerability amplifying in powerful clarity. She realized she stood not just to convince them with her words but to show them her truth. Instead of retreating, she leaned deeper into her narrative, a quiet defiance rising within her. Perhaps exposing her fears meant disarming him, allowing the rawness of her experience to speak louder than potential criticisms. As her presentation progressed, she noticed that subtle nods from her audience were replacing looks of doubt. Encouragement flared in those small gestures, painting her confidence with strokes of acceptance. Finally, she wrapped up the tale with a question to the audience, a clarion call cloaked in sincerity. How many of us are holding back our true selves, afraid that our vulnerabilities hold no value? The air buzzed with silence, and she felt a tremor of connection pulse through the crowd as they contemplated her words. After the final applause faded, Sarah stepped off the stage, a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration rushing through her. The battle hadn't just been external. It was layered, complex, and deeply personal. She discerned a fragile strength crackling within her, the knowledge that she had confronted her fears, even if just for one day. But as conversations erupted around her, lingering doubts tugged at her. Had she truly slayed that vulnerability? What awaited her now was a new understanding of herself, a deeper journey that had merely begun. The shadows in her mind were not extinguished, but they had shifted in form. Tomorrow would bring fresh challenges, and the question loomed large. Was she ready to continue redefining who she was, to navigate the next wave of potential doubt that would arise from her newfound authenticity? As the applause faded into the buzzing atmosphere, Sarah navigated the crowd with purposeful strides, exhilaration pulsating through her. Each step brought new whispers and emboldened faces, yet the ghosts of her previous doubts loomed behind her. She could feel them tightening their grip, ready to pounce the moment she let down her guard. Her heart still raced, but this time it was fueled by something other than anxiety. It was a thrill she had hardly dared to imagine, an awakening of potential she had long suppressed. Yet with each cheer and smile, an unsettling whisper echoed. What if it was just a fleeting moment? What if tomorrow you can't rise to this level again? The exhilaration was shadowed by uncertainty, and Sarah wrestled with the dichotomy of her experience. She had bared her soul, and in some intangible way, she felt lighter. Yet she was acutely aware that this fleeting catharsis could turn brittle under a pressing reality. As the crowd thinned, she found Emily waiting for her near the exit. "You were phenomenal," Emily exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with admiration. The genuine warmth radiating from her friend rooted deep in Sarah's chest. Yet, the trepidation couldn't quite evaporate. "Thanks," Sarah responded, attempting to mirror Emily's enthusiasm. Yet she felt fragmented, torn between the high from her performance and the nagging fear that this was simply a facade that could crumble at any moment. "Did you see how everyone responded to your story? You shared something raw, something real. That's what connects us." Emily leaned closer, trying to eliminate Sarah's doubts. But as encouragement washed over her, anxiety crept in. Felt too precarious, too exposed. "Yeah, but what if I can't replicate it?" The admission lingered in the air, heavy with the weight of resilience and fear. Emily tilted her head, frowning. "You can't measure authenticity, Sarah. It's not about replication. It's about continuing to share, growing with it." Growing with it. Sarah felt the phrase slink around her mind, both comforting and challenging. Could she really embrace a journey that required daily exposure of her vulnerabilities? The thought shook her, igniting a storm within. With a forced, tentative smile, she stepped out into the cool evening. The shadows from earlier seemed to swirl around her, whispering judgments. Returning to the comforting chaos of her life seemed almost insufferable now. It made her curious. Who would she be without her safe havens? In the stillness of the suburban street, she turned to Emily with a newfound yearning. "What's next for you?" "For us?" Emily's brow furrowed as she pondered, then said, "An upcoming workshop. It's focused on personal narratives. I think you should join." Despite her reservations, Sarah felt the urge awaken again. A workshop seemed like an invitation to reaffirm her journey, a place where she could continue to explore the complexities of vulnerability in a room filled with others equally searching for their truths. Maybe, Sarah conceded, contemplating what such an experience could mean for her evolving self. Could she prepare herself to face new critiques, new external reflections of her internal battles? What other stories waited within her to be unearthed? As she bid farewell to Emily and shuffled toward her front door, a realization struck her. Every choice she made from this point on would redefine not just her understanding of vulnerability, but her entire narrative. Would the workshop become a new battleground for her fears, or a sanctuary for growth? The questions seethed, intensifying with every breath. That night, the weight of those possibilities hung heavily on her chest. But there was an unmistakable flicker of anticipation. The journey was unfurling, and the next steps were hers to claim. But as she settled into bed, exhaustion pulling her under, one haunting thought clawed at her internal peace. Was she ready to not only face her vulnerabilities, but to embrace the potential that lay within her own truths? The weeks that followed Sarah's presentation marked a defining period of growth and reflection. She had stepped into the light of her vulnerabilities and faced the tumult of doubt. With each passing day, she navigated the academic landscape with a sense of newfound purpose, determined to assert her voice amidst skepticism. The feedback from her presentation yielded unexpected support, drawing attention from both mentors and colleagues who appreciated the depth of her thought of validation she had longed for. Conversations around the water cooler shifted from hesitant murmurs to intentional discussions about her interpretations of history. Sarah was no longer the quiet observer. She became an engaged contributor, intertwining threads of ancient injustices with modern social dialogues. The echo of her mentor's cautious acceptance still reverberated in her mind, but now it served as motivation rather than restraint. She ventured into new academic circles, presenting her evolving ideas and building relationships based on shared exploration rather than fear. Then came the workshop, a transformative experience she had initially approached with apprehension. Among a group of seekers, all echoing their stories of triumph and struggle, Sarah found a commonality that transcended borders. Each personal narrative unfolded with authentic vulnerability, and for the first time, she understood the strength derived from shared experiences. She immersed herself in discussions, crafting her perspectives further and witnessing how her previous vulnerabilities radiated strength, igniting conversations and built bridges rather than erecting barriers. As she engaged with her peers, Sarah's confidence solidified. She learned to articulate her thoughts with clarity, presenting her ideas not merely as radical proposals but as lenses through which to explore broader human experiences. This pivotal shift represented a transformation. She was no longer just an advocate for connecting histories but also a burgeoning scholar intent on weaving a richer tapestry of understanding. Months later, Sarah stood in front of an audience once more, this time at a prominent academic conference. The room was larger, the stakes feeling even higher. However, today she felt a reservoir of strength. She opened with an engaging personal anecdote that tied her research to the humanity shared among all in attendance. The familiar tremors of anxiety lingered, yet underpinned by the fierce pride cultivated during the workshop and the warmth of support she found among her peers as she navigated through her presentation. The definitive moment came when she posed questions to her audience not as answers but as invitations to join the dialogue. How do we honor our past while embracing our present? In what ways can we transform discomfort into a catalyst for understanding? This approach reshaped the very fabric of her presentation, connecting history and humanity beyond scholarly frames of reference. By allowing others to engage rather than simply listening to her narrative, Sarah transformed from a solitary voice into a frontrunner for meaningful discourse. The applause that followed was loud yet felt like a humble acknowledgement of her journey. She returned to her seat, the waves of fulfillment washing over her as she absorbed the expressions of understanding from her audience. A recognition that bridged the gap between trauma and resilience materialized before her eyes, validating every ounce of effort she invested in honoring the stories of those before her. In the subsequent days, Sarah's burgeoning reputation brought invitations for collaborations and discussions from various academic platforms. The prospect of co-authoring papers and engaging in expanded dialogues now felt tangible, and she embraced each opportunity with an open heart. They didn't merely serve as pathways to career advancement. They validated her narrative as an integral part of scholarly discourse. Looking back, Sarah could remember standing in the archives of the Smithsonian, paralyzed by doubt. Now she grasped how far she had evolved, each obstacle transformed into an agent of personal empowerment. She accomplished not just the presentation but a profound understanding of how vulnerability could serve as a catalyst for change, not just in herself but within the realm of academia. She knew challenges awaited. Navigating the complexities of intellectual discourse would be an ongoing venture. Yet, for the first time, she approached her future with solid confidence, grounded both in her historical insights and the unyielding stories of resilience she chose to amplify. While she embraced the attention, what mattered most was her commitment to sharing with authenticity, forging connections into a brighter discourse for both the present and the future. With each step forward, Sarah reaffirmed her purpose, ready to create a legacy of empowerment in the narrative journey she had only just begun. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that reveal the essence of personal growth. This is the moment to show your support. Hit that like button now to feed the algorithm and help others discover this journey of transformation. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Sarah's journey or any insights that resonated with you. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how vulnerabilities can lead to extraordinary achievements.